You're looking at the massive 14-story copper concentration mill in Kennecott, Alaska. This was the heart of the copper mining process that was abandoned in 1938. Walking through this ghost town is like stepping back in time. Now it's a National Historic Landmark. The copper mines are actually located in the mountains that you see behind the mill. We will be entering the mill from the top in the rear of the building, and I will attempt to describe what we're looking at based on the information from my guide. The mill only does three things. It crushes the ore, it sorts, and it bags it. We will be going through those methods, starting with the crushing. The copper ore was transported to the mill in large buckets that ran on cables, similar to a ski lift. You can see the tramway cables in the back where we will be entering the mill. As we walk through the building, keep an eye out for evidence of haphazard construction. For example, you might see structural beams that are sawed through just to put in a door, or you might see some windows that are ankle height. You might also see some interior walls that are painted red, which would indicate it was once an outside wall. We can only see the supports for the tramway rail that used to be here. Every 52 seconds, an ore bucket would come into this area, similar to a ski lift chair. The bucket would come in on a rail, slow down, and a worker would tilt the bucket, dumping the ore into this opening for crushing. I'm going to include a shot of one of the original ore buckets that I found in a local museum in the town of McCarthy, which is about 5 miles away. After the bucket is emptied, it would be shot back up to the mine, and sometimes the miners would ride the bucket back up to the mine. My guide is pointing out the Buchanan jaw crusher, and basically this is a pulverizing system that gets the ore down to about baseball size. Here our attention is drawn to the grate in the floor, which is an access to a huge storage bin. A worker would have to stand at the grate for their entire shift with a sledgehammer and smash the ore if it was too large for the jaw crusher. We're looking at the high-grade ore chute. If the copper ore was of a high grade, it would skip the whole building and take this path down to the bottom where it was sacked up for the train. We are now passing the ore storage bins. The workers could mine and crush more ore per day than they could process, so they had to store it. Metal scoops mounted on a canvas belt would go down to the bottom of the shaft, get the ore out of the storage bins, and dump it down to some vibrating screens for sorting, and we'll see those shortly. As we head down to the next floor, you can get a sense of the size of the building by looking down over the rail. I'm not sure that we can see the bottom. We're going to pass by these sorting machines because they're better examples on the next floor down. Sorting begins here. The guide is demonstrating how this vibrating screen would move. Crushed ore would come down through chutes to the vibrating screen, and fine particles would fall through, going downstairs for sorting, and larger rocks would roll down to a different trough that leads to the crushing department. We are looking at a steam radiator. I was told that the temperature could reach about 60 below in the wintertime, so I was surprised to learn this was not for the workers. Water was being used in the sorting process, so this was mainly to keep the water from freezing. Heading down to the next floor, we're going into the crushing room, and there's two machines here. One is called the Simon's Disc Crusher and the Trailer Roller Mill. And basically these were used to crush the ore down to about marble size. The sorting process continues at the bottom of this long staircase. This machine is called a Hancock Jig. The ore would be suspended in a tub of water, and the jig would toss the ore up and forward in sort of a repeating motion. And the purpose of this machine was to separate the copper from limestone or other material. And that worked because the copper was heavier. We are heading into an area that contains some of the shaker tables, which represent the rest of the sorting system. Shaker tables would have water in them and vibrate laterally at very high RPMs, and that causes the copper ore to migrate towards the end of the table. We'll see more of these on the next floor. We're passing by the repair shop, which is currently off limits. This is where spare parts would be kept, and it was the only heated room in the building. And the idea was to keep the workers' fingers as nimble as possible. Before the national park was founded in 1983, this building was open to the public. So the people who lived out here ransacked the building, using it for their own parts, such as nuts, bolts, or windows. This machine is the original crusher, and it was brought out in parts on sleds, and that was mainly because the train did not yet have access to this area. So this machine would date back to before World War I. Moving down to more shaker tables, the guide tells me that there's 40 shaker tables in this building. All the tables were on the same drivetrain, but each table had its own belt. So if something goes wrong, they would move the belt to a dummy flywheel that would just spin freely, effectively isolating the table until the repairs were completed. Going downstairs, we get a closer look at one of the shaker tables. Here the top cover is taken off so you can see the drive system for the table with the oil still in there.
Let me shake this for you.
The thing we're missing is the noise. If you can imagine 40 of these machines running at the same time, along with all the rock crushers going, they say these machines could be heard 5 miles away in the town of McCarthy. At the bottom of the building, we have the bagging process, and this is where the ore was sacked up and thrown out to the train. They did not want to be shipping water weight, so burlap sacks were used to help soak up the water. Otherwise, the ore would be frozen to the ice. And you would have a layer of burlap along with a layer of salt and more burlap. Okay, this is the end of the concentration mill tour, and I would highly recommend it. This is just one of the many historic buildings here in Kennecott. We are going to exit the building and move on to the ammonia leaching plant, which is across the street.